Yeah, welcome to our first proper London Apple Admins that we're delivering remote. We've got a couple of talks on this evening, and welcome to everyone who's joined us, both well, from everywhere, really. We've had quite a few international visitors, which is great to see. So we've done our arriving, our mingling, and our welcome. First up would be myself talking about Adobe's license decoder tool. Then we have some really some really good bits and pieces from Dom about the BBC Micro. A bit of PI from Mateo, who's dropped in already. Actually, he's already here. Perfect. A little bit on Sophos from Steve. A bit on Nudge from Neil. And then we'll do, as it's been such a long time, we'll do a bit of a news roundup. It will be a very abbreviated version, I'm afraid, but we'll go through that. As mentioned, we are recording, so please keep it civil, at least. And for Q&A, we've got a Q&A feature on Zoom, and the intention would be at the very end, we'll go for any questions in there. Also helps, I know within the UK, people tend to be a little bit quieter with questions, and that way, if you're not quite sure, you can chuck them into the chat. If you want, you can chuck them in anonymously, and we'll do the best to answer them. Once we're done, I'll spin up another Zoom room in the usual pub channel. Feel free to join us there afterwards. If you wish. So without further ado, I'll get on with my presentation, I guess. Just moving my windows around. Apparently 2 screens is not enough for this. Right, so this is the decoder rings version of the talk. Going through the Adobe license decoder tool for fun and profit. So, my name's Daz Wallace. Some of you know me as Daz Wallace. I'm a lead systems engineer with dataJAR, and jokingly known as one of our Adobe deployment engineers. You can find me at most places, Slack, Twitter, etc. as Daz_Wallace. Today, as mentioned, I'm talking about a free open source tool Adobe have released called the License Decoder tool, also called the ALD, as I like acronyms, makes things a bit easier. So first of all, what is the Adobe License Decoder, or the ALD? So the ALD was an internal tool to help the teams at Adobe understand what licenses are in use on devices or within packages that a customer has built. It's been written fully in Rust and has binaries for both Windows and Mac OS. Currently, it has a separate build for the Intel and Apple Silicon versions for Mac OS. I do have a feature request open that they're looking at to bring a universal binary out for that. So looking back at the tool itself, it looks like it was released publicly around November 2020 and was mentioned in the Adobe Slack channel at that time. However, it wasn't until it was mentioned again last month that I spotted it and decided to do a bit of digging. What does the ALD actually do? So the ALD is a command line tool that can interrogate certain things to determine the Adobe license in use. It will only work on shared device licenses, known as SDLs, or feature restricted licenses, known as FRLs. It won't work on the named user licensing for that. For those who aren't sure or have not heard of the term before, the feature restricted licenses, or FRLs, are a specific type of device license for enterprises, typically, but not always, used with air-gapped networks. You'd normally have to be quite a large Adobe customer to get access to that licensing version. So you can run this tool on a device with Adobe software installed. You can point it towards an Adobe package folder that you have locally before you even deployed it, or you can grab a copy of the operating configs directory from a device and run the tool on that. So how about some examples? So first example shown here is how to check the license status from the device you're currently on. All you need to do is run the command, and that's it, nice and easy. It will just look at the local system, pull out whatever data it can, and present that to you. What about for a package you have locally? So again, you can just run the command, but this time you drag in your Adobe package folder. This needs to be the folder that you have your build, uninstall, and your .ccp file, present, because it's actually that CCP file that the script or the binary will use to find out what license will be deployed. We'll come back to that with a more thorough example. And the last one, if you've copied the operating configs directory from a device, you can run the command again and point it towards that directory, your local copy of that directory. On a machine that has Adobe products installed, that lives in this location here. That's /library, /application support, /Adobe, /operating configs. You could potentially have a customer or a user zip that file up and send it to you, who maybe is having licensing issues. You could then unzip that and run the tool in that directory locally, and it should give you some nice output. Speaking of output, it would be helpful to give you some examples so you know what to expect from these commands. So that's what I've got here in this section. So for these examples, I've only got access to an SDL type of license. I don't have access to an FRL type of license, but it should work the same for those. So first of all, if you don't have any Adobe apps installed, this is the output you'll get. Previously, actually before, I think it was Tuesday this week, this output was a bit more wordy. It looked a bit more like a generic script error rather than something easily identifiable as what it's trying to tell you. But they updated this, I think it was Tuesday this week, that they updated it to improve this output if the device doesn't have any Adobe apps installed. What about if you have Adobe apps installed, but they're unlicensed, or you're using the named user licensing? If that's the case, you'll see the same output here. And this is exactly the same output as what you would see for no Adobe apps installed. So just bear that in mind if you're looking to play around with this tool. And lastly, what if you have some Adobe apps installed with an SDL? You'll get this output shown here. It's fairly long. Very wordy. You can see entries for each of the major tools that you might be licensed for. And just to reiterate, this is if you have Adobe apps installed with a shared device license. This is the output you would see. I have redacted the MPD ID just in case that's confidential. To be honest, I didn't know, so I thought it's safe to redact it on that. With this long output, there's a lot there, there's a lot going on. It's quite difficult to read, but to be honest, it's the first 3 or 4 lines that are interesting. These 3 or 4 lines shown here. So again, you get your license type, you'll get your expiry date. As they're SDLs, they're controlled from the Adobe server side, and you get what kind of things are covered by the license. So for example here, the CC All Apps is covered by the SDL license I was testing with. Can be pretty handy on that one. So, I mean, what is it actually good and useful for? So other than being just like a cool little tool you can run to get some more information that you otherwise weren't sure about or had to kind of guess or do a lot of troubleshooting, you can run this tool and it gives you a nice clear output over what the system sees the Adobe apps licensed with. Helpful if you're expecting to be SDL licensed and actually a user is NUL licensed, all that kind of troubleshooting goodness. For your Jamf admins out there, I've also knocked up an extension attribute that can use the ALD to give you this information from your devices. And you can find that at the link above or as shown here. In that README, I've got some nice documentation over what location is expecting the ALD tool to be installed into, what the outputs are, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully that'll be useful. Talk about the outputs. So for example, if it can't find the ALD at that default location, /library /Adobe license decoder /Adobe license decoder, you'll see this error. If your ALD is installed, but either the device has no Adobe titles or isn't used the shared or feature restricted licenses, you'll see this output. And what this does is it essentially checks to see if the output from the command is not 0. If it's not 0, it means that there's either no apps installed or they're unlicensed. If you have ALD installed and the device does indeed have an SDL or FRL, you'll see this output as shown here. And this output is taken directly from the ALD output that I showed you a few slides back. So it essentially takes those 2 lines, the license type and expiry date, and produces those in the extension attribute. You can then use that hopefully to do smart groups or whatever you want to do, reports, that kind of thing. And lastly, I try to catch any unexpected errors. So if the script gets to a point where it's not sure what's going on, you'll see this output in the extension attribute. It could be there's something unexpected on the machine. It could be there's a typo in the script. I mean, there shouldn't be, I've tested it, but just in case. Or it could be that Adobe have changed how the SDL, the ALD, too many acronyms now, the ALD shows its output and runs effectively on that one. So where can you find this tool? Where can you get your own copy? So first of all, and probably the most obvious one, is you can get it from their own repo. And that's at github.com/adobe/adobe-license-decoder. Nice README on there. I've been speaking to the devs as I've been testing this kind of stuff and writing blogs and this talk. And they've been really good at putting in feature requests, resolving issues, providing information. So they're really responsive there. So if there's any feature requests, you can get them nicely written up. It's definitely worth chucking them in. Secondly, I've taken the liberty of adding some auto package recipes into our dataJAR repo. So you've got download, package, and monkey recipes. Feel free to pillage those as you will. If they're useful to you, great. If they're not, no worries. It was a nice little exercise to keep my eye in when writing recipes. So that was it. It was a bit faster the second or third time I've gone through it. I already do have a blog post on the subject from earlier last month, so feel free to check that out. If you do have any questions or bits and pieces, chuck them in a Q&A. We'll get to them towards the end. Thanks for that. Thanks for listening. The QR code does go to the blog post. It's not a Rickroll, I promise you. I almost did, but it's not. It's a legitimate one. Also, after that, these slides will be put up on the London Apple Admin's website once we get the video and other bits and pieces sorted. So that will go up. One last thing. This has been discussed a lot in the Adobe channel, and I do feel it's worth raising here. So Adobe currently looks to have decided to supply separate Intel and Apple Silicon packages for their apps. You'll see that if you go into the admin console and try to generate a package, you'll now have a new option of either Intel or Apple Silicon for macOS. At the moment, there is a handful of Adobe apps that actually run native on Apple Silicon. The rest are still Intel versions of those apps, even if you pick the Apple Silicon package. So just bear that in mind. But what that does mean is at the moment, you're going to need to have if you're supporting both Intel and Apple Silicon devices, you will need to double up on your packages, which means you're going to have to double up on your storage for those packages. And you're also going to have some logic into your deployment system to make sure that the right copy of the app, the Intel or the Apple Silicon version of the package, regardless of the app that's inside the package, goes to your right devices. Jamf, you'd have to do this manually, probably through smart groups, that kind of thing. With Monkey, you do have the option to specify architecture types. There's a whole nice wiki page on that from Monkey, back from when it used to be the Intel and PowerPC transition. But look, if that sounds not ideal, if you'd like something like, say, a universal package that just works on both, regardless of whether the app works on both, that could be a secondary thing. But even including that, please go to this link. It's a very long link, so I've got the QR code in there as well. Please upvote that. It'll take a handful of minutes. Sorry, not handful of minutes. It'll take literally 30 seconds, maybe a minute to literally go in. It sends you an email. You click go on the email, and there you go. Your vote counted, if you like. As a lot of these things, the more popular they are, the more higher up the list they get, the more people will take notice. And hopefully we can push Adobe towards what would be helpful to us as Apple administrators on that one. Cool. That was it for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. As I said, it was a lot quicker than what it was when I went through myself on that one. So I am a little bit ahead of schedule. But if you do have any questions, please chuck them in the Q&A. We'll get to them towards the end of tonight's bits and pieces. Cool. Enough of me, I guess. Dom, are you ready to do your thing?
Yeah, hopefully you can still see some 8-bit goodness going on there.
No worries. Do you have any slides for this, or is it a pure video?
It's purely video, I'm afraid, no slides.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm going to make you spotlighted, so you should show up as recording as the primary video.
Okay,
and over to you when you're ready.
Right, terrific. I'll just wave hello for the purposes of the video. Hello. Yeah, I'm Dom. My day job is I'm in Adobe's enterprise support team, predominantly supporting larger customers with video and networking type issues and deployment as well. As many of you may have noticed, I'm also on Slack, so feel free to contact me as @DomAdobe on there. But I also spend time outside of work playing with 8-bit computers and other such things, which I was going to show you all now. So as many of you may have already seen, the BBC Micro was a computer in the 1980s, came out around 1981. This particular model is a slight upgrade, came out in 84 with 64K of RAM instead of the default 32K. The machine itself is entirely self-contained. And by default, you would have plugged it into a television to tune in radio to the relevant UHF signal or composite video out. The machine itself runs off of ROM. It also comes with a disk drive, or at least you can buy a disk drive for it, or you could back in the day. Nowadays, all these sorts of things are available to buy on eBay or from people who found them in their attics. One very important point, if you are extracting a BBC Micro from your attic that has not been used in several decades, make absolutely sure that you replace certain capacitors in the power supply. A beeb that's not been used for a long time, the capacitors will dry out, deteriorate in certain ways, and I can tell you from personal experience that there will be smoke when you power it on for the first time in so long. But the repair is relatively easy to do if you're good enough with electronics, but there's a number of different people online, like on eBay and so on, that will do it. Particular nod to Retro Clinic, who did the mod for my beeb, along with another minor change to make games run despite the B+ 64K upgrade. And that's kind of the bulk of what I was going to talk about today. So back in the day, you could run games on the beeb. Elite is running here. This is one particular good example of a game for the BBC Micro, which was groundbreaking when it came out in 1984. As you might guess from the name, it is the predecessor to Elite Dangerous, which came out only a few years ago, actually written by some of the same people. And Elite was particularly groundbreaking, not just in terms of the graphics, but the fact that it was an entirely open world. So graphics-wise, it really stretched the machine. You actually got 2 screen modes happening at once here, with the 2-color mode with the wireframe graphics, and the 4-color mode with the actual head-up display and so on. And yeah, it really stretched the machine. It did all kinds of interesting things, which you just didn't get in other games, where you had the ability to just go anywhere you wanted to. I mean, nowadays we're used to this kind of thing, of course, with the likes of GTA, and I'm not going to try and dock with that space station right now because that would just be an absolute disaster. Yeah, you get all kinds of games nowadays where the entire world is open. You don't have to follow a set process. But with Elite in particular, you have a galaxy of stars. You have details about each solar system that you can see, and all of this is generated procedurally. So it doesn't actually take up a huge amount of memory. It just uses a formula to work out whether it's an average agricultural or an industrial planet democracy, where it's got black furry felines or some other kind of species, which is the main species on that particular planet. And so, yeah, the game itself really took advantage of all the various different things about the beeb, but that's not it. Because if we, simplest way is to just turn the machine off. Yes, you can safely turn the machine off. If we reboot the machine, and I'll just show you briefly, hopefully this is going to come out on the camera. Yeah, we have installed in this beeb a Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi Zero, in fact, interfaces directly with the 1 megahertz bus of the BBC Micro. And we also have a USB interface, which is basically used as a sort of virtual disk drive. So I've got a USB stick attached here, and I can load in disks and so on. But the Raspberry Pi is particularly interesting because it allows for an upgrade which was only really available to people who had lots of money back in the day. You wouldn't have bought this particular upgrade as a home user. So you can see here, we've got the actual startup screen says Acorn Tube 6502 64K. Normally it would have just said BBC Micro 32K. The Tube is a second processor. The Beeb is actually designed with a second processor in mind, which again for its time was way ahead of many of the other machines that were available, certainly for home use at the time. That was just a keyboard. And with the second processor, you could emulate various other processors on the machine, not just the 6502 itself, but the 286, for example, and the Z80 as well. I don't have examples to show you right now from the 286 or the Z80, but there's a couple of example programs that get supplied with it, which just show the speed of it. This is the actual Raspberry Pi running the code itself, whereas if we turn it off, then you can just compare the speed. And of course, Elite was running with the Pi turned off beforehand. So if we, of course, it's not going to work now because I've turned it off. So if we just go for the 3 megahertz version, you can see just the default speed of the machine is significantly slower with the Raspberry Pi running at what would have been the speed of the second processor. But even the second processor at the user speed had a huge advantage, obviously being a secondary processor. You gave you more RAM, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so in terms of the upgrades that you can have, the virtual disk allows you to have a view of the SSD, a view of the USB stick that's attached to it, and using the ROM in there, using the interface that you saw, you can actually load in games or disks as virtual images. And so you load them in, and then you have to remember a particular key sequence in order to actually boot the disk. But then you get a game like Elite, which it takes full advantage of the second processor. This is the actual second processor version of the game. This is not written specifically for the Raspberry Pi. This is as if I had the standard upgrade of the second processor attached to this Beeb. And as you can see, we've got many more colors and all kinds of other things going on. There's a number of other differences in terms of the game itself. Like when you dock, you get more colors and so on, and different ships are different colors and all that kind of thing. Yeah, this is just one example of something which made a huge difference. And there's a number of other games which took advantage of this. And I'm just going to be really naughty and encourage the police to come out just to demonstrate the speed of it. And it runs a little bit more smoothly as well. So yeah, all kinds of interesting. And you can load in a bunch of other games, but you have to disable the Pi for that because a lot of games weren't compatible with it. But what you can also do, if you don't happen to have a BBC Micro, is you can persuade a Raspberry Pi to behave a bit like one. Assuming I've got the right input. And so the other keyboard that you see here is actually attached to a Raspberry Pi, which probably needs rebooting, running RISC OS. RISC OS is written by the same company that made the BBC Micro, who went on later on to build the Acorn Archimedes, which actually uses an ARM processor, which you might be familiar with, of course. The ARM processor was actually developed on the BBC Micro using similar idea with the 1 megahertz bus in terms of attaching external hardware. And I'll just increase the resolution slightly so that we can actually see it. Should do it. Right, there we go. And so RISC OS, the original operating system for the Archimedes series of computers by Acorn in the 1990s, has been developed since then as well. It's changed ownership a little, but the operating system itself is now available for the Raspberry Pi. You can also run Archimedes games on the Raspberry Pi itself, although I've not had a huge amount of success with that. But what you can also do is you can install a BBC Micro emulator. And so you can actually run original games from the Beeb itself on the Raspberry Pi without actually having to have a Beeb. And so having discovered that this was possible, I decided I absolutely had to put the red function keys, which of course are a throwback to the BBC Micro and to the Archimedes itself, absolutely had to do that on my IBM Model M. And so you can run games like Frack, for example, which was a classic in 1984. And they run extremely well, which is quite amazing considering. And of course, you have the advantage of having the HDMI output, which just makes things a whole lot nicer. And that's one option of what you can do with the Raspberry Pi. I feel bad just unplugging these, but it's a whole lot faster than shutting them down and doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. Now, what you can also do with a Raspberry Pi in even more fun ways is you can switch to a composite video, because this one is a really, really old Pi Zero. And you can run RISC-OS Pico, which is a cut-down version of RISC-OS that RISC-OS have released, which actually just runs a command line. It's not quite a BBC Micro. It's actually the Acorn Archimedes operating system, but without the GUI. And so it's as fast as an Archimedes. It's as fast as RISC-OS running on the Raspberry Pi. Yeah, it can draw circles nice and quickly, which the BBC Micro itself couldn't do. And that's just quite fun for being able to write some programs in and certain other things. But yeah, basically there is a huge market in these kinds of upgrades for the BBC Micro itself, and there's a lot of interest in Raspberry Pi, RISC-OS type stuff as well, especially because you can play games on it, which is great. RISC-OS itself, as I say, is being developed on an ongoing basis, but you'll find eBay has various upgrades. There's a forum, the Stardot forum for the BBC Micro. You can also plug in the Beeb into an adapter, such as this, which will give you a HDMI out from a SCART input. This one's particularly successful at getting a decent signal. There's a couple of them I tried actually. But this will take a SCART, so you can buy a cable which connects into the BBC Micro, which will take its RGB signal from its own specific connector, and you just plug it into the back of your TV, which is what I had going beforehand. You then plug that SCART into a conversion box such as this, which upscales it and gives you a HDMI output to your telly. So you don't even need a TV which has a SCART connector on it. It will also split out the audio, which is another minor issue that you can end up having, where it tries to send audio to your TV, but you might not necessarily want that. And yeah, that's about what I was going to say about that. Any questions or requests?
Thanks, Dom. That was really cool. If folks have any questions, if you chuck them in the Q&A section, we'll pick them up towards the end. But no, thanks, Dom. That was that's really cool. I think you might have a conference talk in the making there, if I'm honest.
Cool. I could show off some more games or something like that. Many of which run demo sort of modes, which is quite nice just to leave them running in the background, of course. But yeah, there's loads of different aspects to that. Oh, teletext, of course. Yeah, of course, teletext. Sorry, I forgot to mention, teletext was a major thing with the BBC Micro because it was the default screen mode that you started off with. The teletext mode was added to the BBC Micro before its release. I thoroughly recommend the BBC documentary Micro Men, which may be viewable on YouTube as well, which explains the history of the British government's tender for a computer for schools, where it basically went up against the ZX Spectrum. The BBC Micro won, and the BBC said, right, we want teletext mode on the machine. And so you can do all kinds of fun things with that, where you have very small amounts of memory being taken up for text and graphics, as obviously we've probably all seen on televisions up until a few years ago. There's even the possibility of running a teletext server on a Raspberry Pi and connecting that up to a TV, which will show you teletext graphics. And there's even a version of that which takes the data from the BBC website and shows it to you in a format which is exactly the same as CFAX used to look like. Yeah, there's as I say, there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on with that. Forums, discussions, and things being sold and so on as well. So yeah.
Cool. No, thank you very much. Cool. I am going to take the spotlight off Dom. Matteo is next. Are you ready for us, Matteo?
I guess so.
When you're ready, if you don't mind sharing your screen.
Yeah.
No rush. We're really good on time, so no worries there.
Oh my God, that's not good for me. You had your fun. This is now going to be less fun. Does it look acceptable?
Yeah, looks good.
Cool. I'm new to Zoom, as they say. Okay, so this is a presentation that I did in our company a bit over a year ago, before the whole COVID mess. And it was aimed at our operation teams, so normal people talking to clients. But actually quite a lot of developers got interested and had questions that I didn't expect from them. So I thought you may also absolutely not care, but probably should know those things in case you don't. So let's go. Yeah, let's skip that. PI in UK, as per GDPR, is basically personal details. And that is a very, very broad term. Anything that conceivably can be used to identify a person is protected under GDPR. So if you ever wondered, that's answered this question. That's all. And GDPR provides a set of principles that explain how you should interact with it. So you shouldn't break a law. Surprise. You should be fair and transparent with what you are doing with, I'll be probably calling it customer data the whole time, but that's the PI data. So you should be fair and transparent to the customer what you are doing with the data. That includes your own employees and the things you are doing with your employee data. You should only collect what you need with a clear purpose. You should collect as little data as possible. You should make sure the data is correct. It should be stored only where it's needed when it's needed. Integrity and confidentiality, that's the same and similar to making sure it's accurate. And accountability, so if someone messes up, you should know who messed up, why. You should know who does what with the data. All of this is like simple and makes sense, which is quite surprising for a government thing. Now, things we can collect in our company, but not necessarily do. Details that are just sensitive. You look at it and it's straight up sensitive. So phone, email, address, company address, different ID numbers like NIN, tax codes, someone's IP. It is actually considered PI, even though we know usually isn't. Doesn't let you identify someone. Also details about the person that on their own don't let you identify the person is actually fully considered under GDPR, and you should protect them too. So date of birth, credit scores history, vulnerable state is interesting one. We started dealing with it some time ago. If someone is sick, has a cancer, has mental issue, that's protected under GDPR. You have to be very careful who knows about that. Financial data, judgments, that's the same. Opinions about people. and estimates you are making about those people. So totally things that may not be true, but you are storing in relation to this person. Those two last may not have to be provided to a customer, usually shouldn't be provided to the customer if they make a data access request, but they should be protected under GDPR. So this is quite broader than I thought before I started looking at the subject. Now, iwoca has built-in, home build CRM. It's called Backyard. I reference it as a CRM everywhere, and it does lots of fancy things and lots of terrible things too because it's homemade. Every point of data we have a customer has a PI data score, and 3 to 5 is considered sensitive to the level where we limit access to it. So, for example, if you are an onboarder, you may have access to, let's say, 500 customer worth of data. So if you open a customer, you will see a bunch of things, and it counts as one. And it's counted based on amount of data you need to access to daily do your job, but not much more. If you need to make a custom report because you are doing some analytics and that report includes PI data, you probably won't be able to do this without raising it to someone else. And then obviously teams like finance, they need to look at much less customer data. So first of all, they don't have access at all to a lot of it, but also have much lower limits because they don't have to look at that many customers. So that's how we internally implemented throttling access to sensitive informations. I don't know how this works in other CRMs like, what's the big one? The one at S, you know what I mean. But the downside is this only works with our CRM. So we will get to this point in a moment. Foresight, key principles. So obviously there are actual rules, just follow them. But we want to protect data of our clients, users, and employees, and make sure that we are actually being fair and honest with them. So even if the law allows for something, we will do our best not to do dodgy shit with their data, especially if they don't know it. And what I really liked as a rule of thumb, and that helps if you get like, oh, this is a company ID, you can just find it on the internet and then get more details. Well, do you need those information in the report you are making? Does it help with the report? If not, it shouldn't be there, regardless if it's protected or not. That's for starters. But the second, more helpful, is would you be fine with like making a tweet about it? So do you think someone would be pissed if you would say, hey, this customer just got a loan for us, and you post the customer's name and surname? If conceivably yes, you probably shouldn't do this. And this is a chart we are sharing a lot in the company if someone has questions. So our CRM is obviously main source of truth. It contains all of the details. It directly interacts with the database. And this is what every normal user, every normal person can access to access customer details. CRM is able to generate reports, basically spreadsheets, that can contain all of the customer data, but in a form of a spreadsheet. So show me all the customers that have been sent any money today. And then for those customers, show me their names, surnames, and emails. So this is obviously the same source of truth. Can contain PA data, but doesn't have to. You can make a report that references just customer numbers without any PI data because maybe you don't need it. If you do need it, you will be throttled. Be considered, don't do that. Now, CRM also has like a few additional things connecting directly to it that show only analytics and stats. Basically, graphs and summaries. You cannot pull any PA data, even if you tried. So it's fine. It's sensitive in some cases because competitors could see that, oh my God, we issued that many loans to customers, but on its own, it's not like on the GDPR level, we don't care, it's fine. And then we go into the dodgy systems. So Google Drive. Google Drive is approved by our compliance team to contain sensitive details, including PI data. And let's be honest, it contains contracts of employees quite often. It can contain sometimes some of customer details. Quite often it will be the best system to contain specific informations, or you have to send someone CSV that contains some sensitive data. It's also not made for it. So we are making very sensitive point that you shouldn't put stuff in it if you can avoid it, because it's not made to contain customer data, even though admins can later find it, delete it if they need. It's a lot of work. Now, Slack, Hangouts, and Gmail, main communication platforms, and people love just send someone a document, just call customer by name and surname, do all of those things, but just talk while talking about their work. And we are making it very clear this is not allowed, both internally, just stop, and externally, like this is not a proper way to handle data. And they can't be on our level in theory, yes, audited in such an easy way as a CRM. They have some tools, but it's not like one click and you get informations. But on top of that, our compliance team just haven't cleared them for containing PI data. We recently upgraded our Slack, so we now have more access via API to pull details, but we aren't paying for enterprise, so we don't have for Slack full DLP, like some others may do. Hangouts is just horrible. Also, obviously, I'm referring to chat. Not everyone in our company actually moved from Hangouts to chat, even though we've been telling them for years now that they shouldn't use it at all and just go to Slack. But we are not willing to switch it off. Gmail, confidential mode, really good feature. Obviously, if you are using different email providers, it's a different game. Now, third party. Third-party tools mean literally everything, and the process is literally the same for every system. You raise an official request that goes to compliance. Compliance contacts that provider, verifies who they are, why do they need our information, do we want to provide that information, how will it be provided, on where are the servers where the data will be stored. Generally quite painful job, and no one likes it, possibly including them. My compliance team, for the last 3 contracts I tried to sign, they literally corrected those companies and forced them to change their DLP and TOS for like global customer base, because we just like, this is wrong, you are not allowed to do this, and they went and changed it. Kind of hard if you were trying to sign the contract, but a good thing. And all of this, the problematic part is, as admins, we should know all of that, but also it's the most boring part of our jobs, and I don't like it. And most users in the company don't particularly care usually, and they don't appreciate us stopping them doing something, even if that something is sending, I don't know, 500,000 emails to Facebook instead of hashes. So yeah. Also, fun stuff. Facebook was horrified at suggestion that they will just get an email CSV and said, no, please don't send this. Talk to your IT team. So that was fun. Main points to take out of this very short presentation. Do you know what data you collect, process, and store within your company, including employee data? Do you know where this data sits? Is it a CRM? Is it Google Drive? Is it HR system? Do you know who can access those systems? Do you know what other systems and devices can interact with it? Do you know if someone has API access to your HR system and regularly pulls employee data, for example, for some other project that HR approved 3 years ago and forgot to tell anyone? Have anyone verified those systems that have access to those informations? If not, maybe it's worth having a look. We quite recently started using some Chrome software that, for example, verifies permissions that Chrome extensions have and check if they cannot do some suspicious things? Are the systems where you put information actually made by the company or some random guy? All of those things are basic, but the moment they contain data belonging to people from UK, from European Union, it actually becomes quite dodgy if you don't know those things. And done.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. That was very informative on that one. As always, if you've got any questions, chuck them in the Q&A. We'll grab them towards the end. But no, thank you very much. Nice presentation. Steve.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I feel like if we were in the pub, everything would be dragging, and here we are, sort of crashing ahead, like, you know, which is awesome. It's all good.
Desperate for beer, I think it is.
I suppose so. Well, hang on, let's see. So let's sound.
No worries. Over to you, sir.
Well, yeah, sure. So, you know how it is, right? So, we're trying to organize a meetup. Oh, good, it's Zoom. I've lost everyone. It's just me, by the way. If you have multiple screens and you've got Zoom, and I spend all my time on Zoom, and I still can't find anyone anymore.
We're all hiding from you.
Oh, fair enough. Well, maybe that's what I need, because I always say you're supposed to sort of make sure you can't see your audience. But anyway, you know how you're doing a presentation, or rather, we agreed to do a meetup, and we're not sure about talks. And I go, yeah, I'll do a talk. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And then I realized that means I actually have to do a talk. And it also means, because we're not in the pub, I've actually got I've been watching the beginning of this session while sort of wrangling a toddler, inhaling some lunch and trying to find, dinner and finding some beer. But anyway, I don't know, I'm a bit sad about my missing video people. I don't know. Anyway, so this is entitled Learn How Sophos is Awesome and Causes No Problems at All for Fun and Profit. Or you can subtitle it How I Learned Lots About System Extensions That I Was Probably Happier That I Didn't Know Before. So hi, I'm Steve. I work at ThoughtWorks, which I'll cover in a bit, and I'm one of the London Apple admin herders as well. So we'll start with a video, if I can make that work. This is, can I share sound into Zoom? Is that working?
It isn't only in Britain that spring this year has taken everyone by surprise. Here, in the Ticino, on the borders of Switzerland and Italy, the slopes overlooking Lake Lugano have already burst into flower, at least a fortnight earlier than usual. But what, you may ask, has the early and welcome arrival of bees and blossom to do with food? Well, it's simply that the past winter, one of the mildest in living memory, has had its effect in other ways as well. Most important of all, it's resulted in an exceptionally heavy spaghetti crop. The last 2 weeks of March are an anxious time for the spaghetti farmer. There's always the chance of a late frost, which, while not entirely ruining the crop, generally impairs the flavor. And
yeah, so I can just get my coat now. That's the basic joke, right? So it's April Fool's Day. Spaghetti grows on trees. Sophos causes no problems at all. We can get some beers. So in the beginning. So we'll start with Graham, because everything starts with Graham. So if you're not familiar with Graham Gilbert, he's on Slack a lot. He has opinions about things. He's even got his own little "What would Graham Gilbert do" reaction emoji in Slack, which is kind of nice. But anyway, this was a talk he was going to give at Macaduck last year. I suspect he may need to retitle it a little bit if he's going to give it later this year. But the basic premise is, it is a good idea to be on the latest Mac OS. The latest version of Mac OS is a software patch, and you should be there as soon as you can. This is a good idea. I would like to be like Graham. Oh, wait, and Laura. Look at Laura. Laura works at SAP or SAP. I never know which way I'm supposed to pronounce that one. But she, after 3 months with Big Sur, 3/4 of her fleet is on Mac OS 11. That's awesome. I would like to be more like, Graham and Laura. I would like my fleet at ThoughtWorks to be on the latest Mac OS really as soon as is possible. But here's the thing. So I work for a medium-sized IT consultancy. We've got offices all over the globe. We help our clients solve difficult problems. We work really closely with them, and that means working with their tool sets. And so when it came to tools like, when it came to Catalina, for example, it was kind of hard to be able to give the go-ahead, because even if none of our tooling is still using 32-bit binaries, for example, it's hard for us to know if a client VPN might be, and things like that. And so for Catalina, we kind of held fire, but we felt that for Big Sur, this was the time we would be more Graham and more Laura. And our secret weapon was Appleseed. There's some whatever. Anyway, both works. Potato, potato. Also, never check the questions. So yeah, the Appleseed was our secret weapon in this instance, because Apple have made getting into Appleseed that bit easier these days. Because if you have Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, all of a sudden you can pretty much grant anyone with an managed Apple ID access to Appleseed. And what was even nicer in this year's roundup was that, of course, you could submit team feedback. And team feedback was really exciting because it means you could actually see if anyone was submitting any bloody feedback at all. And it also meant that it kept me honest, that I had to submit feedback so people could see I was submitting stuff. But also you could see patterns in feedback before they reached Apple, which was really interesting and really valuable. And so we got to the end of this sort of, as Big Sur became closer and closer, we hadn't hit any showstoppers. Everything was working pretty well, even Sophos, despite the fact that our account rep would sort of make funny noises and stuff when I would say it was fine, it was fine. I mean, I do wonder if we have a fairly light touch Sophos config, and so I do wonder if that's one of the reasons why we weren't seeing problems. But basically, everything was fine. We'd sent out comms saying, hey, everyone, Big Sur is coming in a couple of weeks, and we are pretty happy for you to go when it goes live. And then Sophos sent us this. And they said, oops, they said, yeah, we're not quite ready to support Big Sur on release date, which is a shame. So as a result, it meant that my dreams of actually, doing an early rollout were destroyed. Kind of sad. And it also makes me think that it's all back to this sort of, really, what year is it when we're stuck waiting for our endpoint, protection to keep up with Apple's release schedules? It's not as if system extensions are a new thing. Kind of sad. So also, this is also a fantastic gift because I'm obviously modeling my COVID look on Robin Williams in Jumanji. And then not an awful lot happened. So we lent on our account rep and we shouted at them a bit and they made apologetic noises. And people wanted to upgrade to Big Sur and we said that they couldn't and people were sad. So we were able to add devices to an early access program, and that was cool. And that's kind of where we were for the last few months, really. And this is where I hit the point where I discovered that system extensions are something that I don't really I think I get them, but maybe I don't really get them. This came to me the other day. So I'm like, you see this? It's kind of this, And then Apple make it even more confusing because then you discover that kernel extensions have been rebranded. So they used to be kernel extensions and now they're legacy system extensions. So there are good system extensions and bad system extensions. And either way, money hoops must be jumped through to make them do what they need them to do. Fun times. The other thing that we discovered was that Sophos' own documentation. So this is their user-facing documentation, and it's not really driven around automation. It's all about dear end user. Click here, click here, click here, approve, yes, yes, you'll see this pop up, that's okay. And that's fine if you've got a small estate of Macs. It's a bit messier if you've got a few thousand and you're having to actually verify someone's followed these instructions, because where I work, when people are faced with a question like this, they'll probably say no, for all sorts of very, very valid reasons. However, what I did learn is, look at this, we have the Sophos community. So the thing I've realized really recently is you've got proper official Sophos pages and then you've got the community pages. And it's the community pages where you actually find the useful stuff. So any of you who deploy Sophos, you'll have been to this page before because it just keeps scaling and growing, and it has the complete list of all the things that you need to pre-approve full disk access so you don't get pop-ups when the damn app launches in the first place. It makes me a little bit sad because it's Jamf focused and I don't really Jamf, but it's still enough to get me started. And it was enough to enable me to create the profiles that I needed for full disk access. And then they updated this to also include the system extensions required for the new ScanD and network web filter D. So to start with, SimpleMDM, which is our MDM of choice, didn't actually have system extension support, but they added it, which was nice. But not before I'd had to roll up my sleeves and learn how to actually make config profiles by hand myself. Artisanal, I believe, is the term that's used in the Slack channels. And it was a fun experiment, and I kind of wish I'd paid more attention because there's probably a presentation I could do if I could remember anything that I'd learned. But all I learned was it's sometimes easier to let UI define this stuff. Anyway, so I've got my profiles. They're in my MDM. My work is done. I can relax, have a beer. But my work wasn't done. So it turns out if I build a machine from scratch, yeah, fine. Profiles hit the device, Sophos installs, there are no weird pop-ups, everything is cool. But when people upgrade from Catalina to Big Sur, then now they still get prompts to approve extensions. But the MDM delivered the extensions, and actually, Simple lets me scope them. So I've even made a point of delivering these profiles to Big Sur, specially. Plus, what the hell is this? I also have the exciting world of the network proxy configuration thing, which in my testing would appear once, and I could click allow, don't allow, or I could ignore the damn thing, and it would never pop up again. So it became very hard for me to know how I could manage it at all. But again, my curious end users were like, I don't like this, I'm not allowing this, which potentially means we've got a broken antivirus client. So once again, I went back to the internet, and look, it's the Sophos community again. So huge shout outs to M. Scott Blake and someone else called Julian Moore, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, who hang out both here and in the Slack channel, who were incredibly helpful in getting a profile together that would help pre-approve this too. So basically the short version is the community pages are really good. The official pages are not so good. And our Sophos account rep has said that all the community stuff is broadly vendor reviewed so that Sophos won't publish it if it's full of bad advice. So anything you see in those pages should be considered gospel. It probably explains why there's so much Jamf and so much not Jamf, and it probably means I'm going to have to write a page, but that's by the by. So what I've basically learned is managing Sophos on Macs in 2021 looks a lot like this. Anyway, the other thing that's interesting to know is if you're using Sophos Cloud, because it's a cloud product, there are phased releases. And Sophos will release stuff in groups A, B, C, D, whatever. And what we learned is if you're a larger customer and they care about you more, you're in group C, which means that the other people in the earlier groups get to be the canary group. And if a Duff product is released, that they can hold off for people in group C. However, we didn't want to be in group C. We're quite happy to try out betas. We're happy to work with many vendors to say, yep, we'll try the new stuff. But also we had a stack of people going, can I upgrade to Big Sur now? How about now? How about now? Has anything changed since I asked 5 minutes ago? Because I'm sure you can imagine we were pretty desperate to be in group A. And it turns out if you lean on your account rep, you can make that happen. So something to bear in mind. But I still had the problem. So Ken is not a pseudonym. I am not Ken. But we also still had this issue, and I went idly into the Slack channel. And blimey, when you look at this is exactly the problem I've seen. I've seen that, yes, if I uninstall Sophos, that's suggested by Graham. Hello, Graham. But no, it turns out that actually, if we scope the profiles to 10, 15, 4 and above, and pre-deliver them, then all of a sudden, everything will work, and people will be able to upgrade, and they won't get nagged, and everything is awesome. So yay, thanks to Slack, thanks to the community support pages, less thanks to Sophos. Continuing the Slack theme, actually, there was also this. So I saw this posted in the channel, and I grabbed it because I genuinely thought this was a work of fiction, like he was being ironic, that the way that he phrased this and everything else. And then I went back to Slack a few days later and discovered that, no, he's posted a 36-minute video and a PDF and a flowchart and everything else. And I feel like I'm doing it a disservice by doing like a 10-minute talk in which I don't cover any of those things. But basically, as we get to the end, the TLDR for my exciting Sophos journey is that the Sophos channel in Slack knows more about Sophos on Mac than Sophos seem to. Sophos community pages are your friends. System extensions are potentially more annoying than kernel extensions. Profiles like comedy are about timing. You need to get the right profile on the disk at the right time. And the most important thing to remember is whatever you do, you can't win. So we accepted that not every device will be perfect. Some people will be upgrading from older versions of Mac OS. Some people may have dropped out of management. They won't get the profiles on time. So we warned people they would potentially see pop-ups. The people who saw pop-ups would raise tickets going, hey, I saw a pop-up. And people who didn't see pop-ups would say, hey, I saw your documentation about pop-ups. And I was wondering why I didn't see pop-ups. Anyway, all the config profiles we use broadly are all sitting in this GitHub repo, which is public, and you're welcome to go for a dig through if you want. Nothing hugely exciting in there. And thus, here endeth my exciting Sophos journey. Thanks all for bearing with me.
Thanks very much. That was really good.
It's really weird doing this in silence. I'd literally lost the video and silence, dead silence. But maybe this is what we need, other than being distracted occasionally by the chat.
It is difficult with not having the feedback, I think. But no, it was really good. It went really well. Very funny as well. Oh man, see, I haven't even got. I'm seeing Graham talking about removing the system extensions. I mean, the other thing we're seeing too is that so 10.04, which is the version that works with Big Sur, is being delivered to Catalina and below, and the network extension gets installed. And because we mention it, people are clicking on it, and then it goes, you can't launch this app. It's not an app, it's just a bundle. And I think when we spoke to Sophos, they said they have a plan to re-architect the whole thing. But at the moment, if you work with it, it's loads of teeny tiny little components. And that's why that full disk access thing is this big, right? Because the profile has to list every single subcomponent. I think what they're planning on doing is reorganizing that at some point. But right now, because it won't open ticket. Yeah. It's also interesting because I've seen that some people will do Sophos with one giant profile containing all the pieces. And what I've been doing instead is we just got loads and loads. So MDM exists at ThoughtWorks broadly to drive Sophos. I wish I was joking. Like there's a little bit of client hardening, but the real bulk of the profiles are all Sophos and about making Sophos do what it needs to do. Anyway, thanks all for your time. And now I get to go and do toddler wrangling upstairs. All right, well, thanks for your time and thanks for the presentation. It's really cool.
Cool, thanks all.
Neil's getting his battle station ready. Neil's up next.
I am ready.
Ready?
I'm going to share my screen. Yes, thank you very much, Darren. Okay, let's see if I can share the right screen and not the wrong one. Okay, yeah, you should see my desktop. Hopefully that's going to turn into something a little bit keynote-y in a second. There we go. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Neil, and I'm a systems engineer at dataJAR. You may know me as Neil Martin83 on the Slack. I'm also one of the herders for London Apple admins as well, so working with Darren, Ben, Graham, and Steve. And so this talk is called Nudging Users for Fun and for Profit. The context really is the thorny topic of software updates and for macOS, but the fun bit for some of us is that we get to nudge our users into submission, or we can achieve profit when they actually install the updates. But hang on a minute. Why are we getting users to install updates? Because you wouldn't think that's a very reliable way to do it. And we all know that Apple release updates for macOS, and it's really important that they're installed on our fleets to make sure we're protected against all the recent security vulnerabilities. We fix the latest bugs, etc., etc. Well, you know, in times past, we wouldn't normally have to do this. We'd have management tools that could do this for us. And you're probably familiar with the old software update binary, which tools like Jam for Monkey had built-in support for. We could trigger it via a script, that kind of thing. But you may have noticed if you've used software update in recent years, especially on T2 Macs and running with Catalina and newer versions of macOS, it's not quite as reliable as it used to be. There's MDM support for sending software updates as well for macOS, but these require device supervision, bootstrap token, which your MDM service needs to support, and they're kind of what I like to term a scattergun approach. So you'd send the command in one shot and you generally hope for the best. It's like fire and forget. And then also you've got the option of pushing an MDM profile that configures the software update system preference pane, which essentially ticks all those boxes to enable automatic downloads, installs, and so on. So we are put the Mac into autopilot, so to speak. But then with that, we are limited or tied down to macOS's native notifications, which unfortunately users can and do often just dismiss or ignore. So, I mean, as well as that, they may not have their Macs powered up long enough, especially overnight, for those automatic installs that we tick to actually happen, and we don't have control over it. So this is where Nudge comes in. So what's Nudge? Nudge is a user-level application written by the wonderful Eric Gomez, who is here with us this evening. And its job is essentially to tell people to update their Macs with a rather large dialogue that guides them to the system preferences software update pane. And by doing this, hopefully, we can make sure that updates are installed in a more native and Apple-approved way. And as we'll see throughout this talk, Nudge is extremely configurable, and you can customize a lot of its behavior based on what you need or how annoying you'd like to be. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, then please stick around. So you can download Nudge from its GitHub repo releases page, which I'll link to at the end. And you'll get the application itself, which is written in Swift UI, and it only runs on macOS 11 Big Sur. You get the launch agent, which by default will open Nudge at user login, and then 0 and 30 minutes past each hour, you can always customize or replace that launch agent to better suit your needs if you prefer that way. We also have an optional logger package, which is essentially a launch daemon, and that catches Nudge's log output to a file at var-log nudge.log. Good for testing, troubleshooting, see if it's actually running. And finally, the final piece is the preferences. These can be either in the form of a good old MDM configuration profile or a JSON file that you would direct Nudge to when you launch it. And if you do go for the JSON option, you can store that JSON file locally on the Mac itself that Nudge is running on, or you can host it on a web server and specify it as a URL. But for this talk, I'm going to be looking at the MDM configuration profile. But we've got a few things to prepare before we let this thing loose. So I'm not going to cover every feature or preference, but I'll try and go over the ones that I think are most important. So first of all, we'll need to edit some preferences. And I'll be using an MDM configuration profile here. And if that's the approach you're going to go for, I really suggest you download the example one linked at the top of this slide, because it gives you a really good starting point that you can really customize things from. So it's nicely to edit. Okay, I'm going to step out of this presentation now, hopefully, and pull up my trusty VM. Let's see what we can do. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. So I have the config profile open. I'm just going to start changing a few options, and we'll start to learn about the preferences. So the first preference I'm going to change is I'll scroll down to OS. We'll look at the OS version requirements array over here. And this key here that's commented out, I'm going to uncomment it. And this is our about update URL. And this will enable a more info button inside Nudge, which when you click on it, opens the URL you put here. So this could be, at the moment, it's Apple's KB for their macOS Big Sur updates. I'll remove that part. Or it could be an internal page on your organization's website, that kind of thing, anything you want. Now I'm going to scroll down. And now we're looking at the required installation date. And this tells Nudge that when you require updates to be installed by, so the deadline, so to speak. And as we approach this date and we eventually pass it, you'll see that Nudge's behavior will change and it gets a bit more persuasive, so to speak. I'm going to set this to, let's say, the 10th of April. So we've got some time. Next, we have our required minimum OS version. And so this tells Nudge the lowest OS version that we need our Macs to be on. And if they are on or above that version of macOS already, then Nudge won't do anything. It won't display. So let's set that to the latest version of Big Sur, which is 11.2.3, unless they've released something newer tonight. And the final thing you really need to set before we can start using Nudge is make sure that set there is the targeted OS versions array here. And this tells Nudge which versions of macOS that it's going to consider as requiring an update. So if the version of macOS you're running isn't on that list, then Nudge won't display. So you generally want to put in every minor release below the required minimum OS version. So let's add a couple here. So we've got 11.2.1 and 11.2.2. I'm going to check the version of this VM here, and this VM is on 11.2.2. So we should target it. I'm going to remove this temporarily. You'll see why in a moment for the first part of the demo. Okay, so that's my profile ready to go. Let's install it. And then we are back to the slides. Because now we've got things set up, we can sort of think about loading Nudge and having a little bit of a play with it. When you're testing, what I'd recommend is that you don't install the launch agent just yet, but instead you can run Nudge directly from the terminal, so you can easily quit it, reload it as you tweak preferences, resave, that kind of thing. But before we get right into it again, what we need to really understand is that Nudge has its sort of 5 stages or levels. I liken them to the older nuclear DEFCON system, and hopefully we'll see why in a minute. And so this is the first stage when Nudge is inactive. It doesn't display a window, and this will be that it will be in this state. Sorry, when the installed version of macOS is at or above the required minimum OS version preference, or Nudge is inactive if the installed version of macOS isn't listed in the targeted OS versions array. Let's see what happens with our VM. Because my OS is not listed here, but it is older than the required version. Let's fire up Nudge, see what happens. So if I launch Nudge here, just in the terminal, just by loading its binary directly, we see nothing. I can do it again and again and again. Nothing happens. There we go. So we're at DEFCON 5. Okay. DEFCON 4. Nudge is at its initial stage at this point. And this is when the installed version of macOS is below the minimum required version and the number of hours before we reach the required installation date is greater than another preference called approaching window time, which I'll look at in a moment. When Nudge is in the initial state, it will refresh and increment something called a deferral rate or count, which again I'll talk about soon, based on the number of seconds set in the initial refresh cycle preference. So at this stage, Nudge will display a window with a single primary quit button. Let's have a look. So I'm going to add my OS version back here to the targeted OS versions array. We'll resave the profile, reinstall it. There it is. Let's run Nudge again, see what it does. There we go. And so we get a window that we can't move. So it has no sort of title bar as such or anything like that, no menu bar. The key commands to quit it, etc. don't work. You can't press escape, you can't do Command W, Command Q, etc. So there it is, it's in your face and it's telling you to do something. So we have different UI elements up here. This little question mark at the top is quite nice. Gives you a little bit of device or system information, like the serial number and the logged in user and the version of Nudge and your architecture. Over here, we have the required version that Nudge wants to get us to, and then the current version of macOS that's installed, and then the number of days left until we reach our deadline, where things start to change a little bit more. There's that more info button. If I click that, we get a web browser that opens that URL we configured before. And so over here, we've got some information about the update. This is all customizable as well. And if I click the button to update the device, we get taken to system preferences, and the software update pane will open up for us. And then it does its thing. And then we can update if we want to. And so what I'm going to do now is just click the later button here to dismiss the window, and that will quit Nudge. Okay. Now, the next stage, or DEFCON 3, things are starting to heat up a little bit. And we're at what Nudge calls the approaching stage. And this will happen, we get to this stage when the installed version of macOS is below the required minimum OS version. And the number of hours before we reach our required installation date is less than what we've set in a preference called approaching window time. When Nudge is at the approaching stage, we'll see a window with 2 quit buttons, and it will refresh and increment the deferral count I mentioned before, which I'll go into details later, based on the number of seconds set in the approaching refresh cycle preference. So it will start to increment that counter based on a different preference. A little quick demo here. So let's set our required installation date to a couple of days in the future. Let's say the 3rd of April. Reinstall the profile again. Cool, isn't installing profiles in Big Sur a pain? There we go. And here we go. So it looks the same as it did before when Nudge was in the previous stage, except we see a quit button that's a bit different. It says, I understand. I click this, and then I get the secondary quit button. So we get a sort of primary and a secondary quit button now. And then we have the other quit button, and that will get rid of it. So it's getting a little bit more persuasive at this point. Okay. Okay, DEFCON 2. Things are getting serious. Nudge is now at a stage we call imminent. So we get to the imminent stage based on the same conditions as before. But then it's the number of hours before we reach our required installation date will be less than what we set in the imminent window time preference, which I believe by default is 24 hours. Again, you can customize, you can change it. The user experience is similar to the approaching stage, or it's very similar, except the only difference here is that the deferral count now bases itself or reads itself from another preference called imminent refresh cycle. So you can make that deferral count more aggressive and more frequent, again, which I'll talk about deferrals in a bit if you don't know what I'm talking about yet. Okay, and then finally, it's time to blow something up because we're at DEFCON 1 and Nudge is now elapsed. And so this means the installed version of macOS is below the minimum required OS version preference, and the required installation date has actually passed. It's gone. Now this window has no quit buttons, and it will refresh and increment its deferral count based on the number of seconds we set in a preference called elapse refresh cycle. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to set this all the way back to March. And we'll give Nudge a nudge. Okay, and so this is now what we have when we've elapsed, and there really isn't an easy way to exit nudge. Most users wouldn't be able to do it. It will just stay there. You can sort of load other windows in the foreground and carry on working, that kind of thing, but it's always going to be there waiting for you to update the device. Now, because I'm running from the command line, I can Control C it. Savvy users could kill all the process name, for example, or unload your launch agent if they know how to do that. But yeah, for most people, that's going to be quite annoying. However, let's get more annoying, because remember I kept mentioning this thing called deferrals. Well, Nudge registers what it calls a deferral when its window is inactive, or it's not inactive focused. So when the user clicks away from it to do something else, for example. And the number of seconds that we set in that current stage's refresh cycle preference has passed. So the window's not active and that number of seconds in the preference has gone. It counts one deferral. And then Nudge brings itself to the foreground again after that deferral time. Be aware though, if users do click the quit button in Nudge or unload the launch agent or otherwise manage to kill the process, the deferral counter will always reset the next time Nudge launches. So it's not based on the number of times Nudge has been opened and quit. And we have a couple of deferral levels or types of deferrals in Nudge. The first one, bit of a mouthful, is allowed deferrals until forced secondary quit button. This sets the number of deferrals Nudge will let you have or allow before it starts to show the secondary quit button. But this only applies when Nudge is at its initial stage, because when we hit the approaching stage and the imminent stage, we will see the secondary quit button anyway. So this could be if you'd like to display that a little bit earlier. The allowed deferrals preference, which is the good one, sets the number of deferrals Nudge will allow before it enables a more aggressive user experience, as Eric puts it. And if you like the annoyance potential you've seen so far, I think you're going to really like this. And I also think it definitely needs a demo. So let's have a look. So I'm going to set all the timers in Nudge to 5 seconds. So let's do a 5-second refresh for everything. The initial refresh cycle there. Imminent refresh cycle elapsed. Approaching. And I'm going to set the allowed number of deferrals to 3 deferrals, just there. And I'm a user, so I have some other little bits and pieces on my VM open at the minute, or on my computer. I'm doing some other work. Got a few windows open. Let's run Nudge and see what happens now. So this could be when the launch agent loads it, for example. Here we go. It comes up, steals focus. You require a security update. I'm going to go, no, I don't. I'm just going to ignore you. And the deferral timer started counting. And after a few seconds, a Nudge's window comes up again. And can you see the deferred count value here has gone to 1. Okay, I'm still going to ignore you. I'm going to carry on doing something else. Oh, it's gone to 2. I'm still ignoring you, carrying on doing something else. Oh, it's gone to 3. Steals focus again. Now let's see what happens now. We've had 3 deferrals. What will it do? Oh, and it's this is the aggressive user experience. So it's made all our windows disappear, and it's loaded system preferences and software update. So it's only hidden our windows. It's not closed them, which you'll be glad to know. So I can load them back up. But you'll notice after the deferral time elapses again, which is 5 seconds for me, Nudge will just keep stealing that focus and hiding all your windows. And there it goes again. So that's really, really annoying. But it's all about maintaining that compliance. Okay, I think we've seen enough of that. Okay, but we didn't have time for some other things here because we really covered Nudge in a nutshell. A few things we didn't have time to go into, such as all the different parts of the UI that you can change. For example, you can add your organization's own branding and text if you'd like to, and there are preferences for all of those things. Nudge also supports localization, so you can change the messages in the text elements to reflect the native language or the locale that the Mac is using. And again, that link will give you some examples of those as well. And if you do think the interface is a little bit too busy for your liking, Nudge has a really simple UI that you can invoke as a command line option at the top, or you can actually set that as a preference in your profile or your JSON as well. And that's an example of what it looks like there. And finally, Nudge will be able to push users to install major macOS upgrades in the future. But since at the moment there's no major upgrade for Big Sur yet, we've got to wait for that. It's not quite here. And then here's everything you need to get started with Nudge, really. We've got the GitHub repo, which has a wiki, and that's growing really quickly. You can all contribute to that as well if you want to. We've got the Nudge channel on the Mac Admin Slack. And also, please take a look at Eric's talk that he did for the Texas Apple admins just a couple of days ago. And there's a link to it there. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you very much, Neil. That was really cool.
Cheers.
I like the nudge in a nutshell. But no, it's really cool. And I realised, obviously, gift of hindsight, that how we're quite early, that actually we probably could give you a bit more room to run with that. Maybe another talk, I guess, next time. But that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. I'm afraid to say you've got more of me. I'm going to go through the news roundup with you folks, and then we'll go through Q&A. I've seen a few questions come in. Most have been answered, but we'll go through them anyway, just so everyone's on the same page on that one. So I need to start my screen sharing first, and then I need to spin up my slideshow. Right, so news roundup. So as we said, it's been quite a long time since we've had a meetup. So it made sense to do a bit of a news roundup. It's very high level. Otherwise, we'd have a couple of hours worth of slides to go through of everything that's changed. So try to keep it quite concise and specific. As a result as well, almost all slides, I believe actually all slides now have a QR code. So if you've got your phones or iPads or whatever smart devices ready with a QR reader, you can grab the links pretty fast. I will add the slide deck to a follow-up blog post once this video goes live. So first of all, I'm sure most of us are aware of by now, Apple have released their what's now current OS, macOS Big Sur, which does present an interesting acronym. This is the first OS in about 20 odd years to have a new major version number, macOS 11. Secondly, Apple have started to move to their own CPU technology. Apple refers to this as Apple Silicon, with the current generation being of the M1 chip family. You can find this new architecture in the latest MacBook Airs, MacBook Pro 13-inch and Mac Minis. This does come with a number of changes, such that requires software and applications to be recompiled and possibly rewritten to run on this new architecture. To help with this, Apple have released Rosetta 2, which is a translation layer to try and help Intel code run on Apple Silicon devices until various developers can get around to updating their software. Those of you who've been dealing with Macs for a while, you may remember the original Rosetta, which is when Apple did their transformation from the PowerPC processors to the Intel processors on that one. With the new Big Sur and Apple Silicon devices, Apple have also released a new KB for those changes for enterprise. Seems to be a bit different from previous years. This KB seems to be a single KB for all of Big Sur's changes, including ones that come out with newer OS updates to Big Sur. So something that's probably worth bookmarking and keeping an eye on as you go through the future. Apple have also released a new security white paper, including details on Big Sur and Apple Silicon devices. Just be aware, for those of you not in the States, the web page will show spring 2020. But the link above, which is also at the bottom of the web page, will link you straight to the PDF, which is the correct spring 2021 PDF. So make sure you're reading the right one when you're looking at this. And as mentioned, that covers Big Sur and Apple Silicon devices. Bit more security. So something that has changed with the Apple Silicon devices is they no longer utilize firmware passwords. You can't set a firmware password on an Apple Silicon device. This KB has a bit more information mixed in with the usual Intel information. It's also not possible to remotely lock an Apple Silicon device from an NDM. If you rely on this kind of a thing for your workflows, start testing and working on alternatives now. Now, these alternatives might be that you push out a remote wipe and you rely on some sort of backup or DLP solution for that data, or something along those lines. If anyone works out a really cool workflow that replaces the ability to remotely lock a device, let us know. We'll have you up for another talk. More than happy for that. There was previously an issue with Big Sur versions prior to version 11.2, where if the Mac was enrolled via MD or rolled into an NDM, they might not have been able to see and install some software updates. There are some workarounds mentioned in the Twitter thread linked above, and the issue should now be resolved of macOS 11.2 or newer. I do see the irony that a software update is needed to fix the inability to run a software update. But as mentioned, there's some workarounds in Twitter thread that can get you past that initial hurdle. Kext and Big Sur. So with earlier versions of Big Sur, it was possible to brick a Mac by trying to deploy a kernel extension profile to an M1 device without a secure token admin user. Between 11.01 and 11.2, there's also been some other sort of strange or unexpected behaviors with kernel extensions or Kexts and Big Sur. The general suggestion here is to get yourself onto the latest version of Big Sur to avoid most of the pain as soon as you can. Also note that it was mentioned that 11.15, macOS 11.15, was the last version of macOS to allow Kexts, quote, without compromise. So you could argue that this isn't really unexpected, but just bear in mind with that. And again, with these changes and the usual bugs with a brand new version of macOS, pretty much just make sure you get yourself into the latest version of Big Sur if you're running Big Sur in your fleet. Back in 2018, Apple mentioned some upcoming changes to the Apple Push Notification Service, or APNS, to switch to using HTTP2 for communication. And that's from the NDM server to Apple. This isn't for the NDM to the device or the device to Apple. As of March 31st, 2021, yesterday, Apple have completed this move and shut down the legacy APNS endpoints. Now, for Jamf Cloud customers, you should have already been switched over. If you're running Jamf Pro on-premise, you need to be running at least Jamf Pro version 10.23 or newer and manually change this option. Alternatively, if you upgrade to version 10.27 or newer, the option will be changed for you. And this link will take you to a Jamf KB on that matter. For any other MDM vendors, please check with their documentation or support. I would imagine, completely guesswork here, but I would imagine that if they are cloud hosted, you're probably okay. If you have to run something on-prem, you might have to do some work here. Cool. And that's it for the very brief news. I'm going to turn off my screen sharing and we can have a look at the Q&A stuff. Right, so first one, it's for me, but Dom's jumped in as well. Cheers, Dom. The question was if the Adobe license decoder tool can also detect if the package is using the AU SST option or not. Now, AU SST is Adobe's update server. So you can have your own Adobe internal update server, either to control updates and or to cache updates. Essentially, this tool is designed specifically for Adobe licensing. It's not to do with anything else like updates or those kind of settings. I'm going to find my notes. There was a question for Dom, actually, with BBC Micro. Are there any drawbacks to the emulation you mentioned, or does it emulate the entire CPU architecture like an FGPA board?
Yeah, I'm assuming the question was in relation to the Raspberry Pi RISC OS emulation of the BBC Micro. As far as I know, it does emulate everything that the BBC Micro does, because games run, and games are often the worst offenders in a sense in terms of using illegal instructions and taking advantage of the machine in as many ways as possible. So just purely from that anecdotal evidence, I would say that it does emulate the BBC Micro very well. I don't know if it actually emulates it at a sort of individual instruction level. I think it probably does, because it needs a it needs a basic 1.2 ROM and a DFS ROM, I think. So you need to provide it with the software equivalent of the hardware in the machine. In that sense, the two ROMs that are necessary to boot the machine up. Sorry, no, not the. Well, it probably has a disk implemented. It the OS ROM, the basic and the OS ROM. Those are the two. So yeah, I'd say it probably emulates very accurately. It isn't a Mr. FPGA, so maybe there would be certain differences, but yeah.
Cool, thank you very much. Is there any other questions from anyone? I can't see anything else in the Q&A. The chat was most of us just rambling on, as we normally do. But if anyone does have any questions for anyone that's delivered any talks today, chuck them in the chat now, if you wouldn't mind.
There's one thing I wanted to point out, actually, Dan, that I didn't mention. The part of the reason for talking about the BBC Micro and the Raspberry Pi and so on, as far as I know, the M1 is kind of the latest iteration of the ARM chip, if I understand correctly, which of course was originally developed on the BBC Micro and was the Archimedes. Now, I might be wrong about some of the details about that, but yeah, as far as I'm aware, this all sort of began with Acorn and the BBC Micro and that kind of thing back in the 80s with those machines that I was showing.
Cool, no worries there at all. Doesn't look like we've got any other questions. I'd like to extend an invitation to you all, and that's obviously an ongoing invitation, at least until we decide to stop doing it. It's been over a year so far, so we haven't stopped. We're going to finish this Zoom session. We're then going to move to the London Apple Admins pub channel, the LAA-PUB.